Rebecca Martinez wiped the sweat from her forehead as she guided the old plow horse through another furrow. Her rounded belly made the work increasingly difficult, but stopping wasn't an option. Behind her, 6-year-old twins Emma and Jake played in the dirt, their laughter a bright spot in an otherwise overwhelming day. The small farm in rural Montana had been her husband's dream, but when David died in a construction accident 8 months ago, that dream became her burden. The bank letters kept coming, each one more threatening than the last. She had 3 months before foreclosure, and with a baby due in 6 weeks, the future looked impossibly bleak. The morning sun beat down mercilessly as Rebecca struggled with the plow's stubborn handle. The tool was too heavy for her condition, but hearing help meant money she didn't have. Emma ran over with a cup of water from their thermos, her small face creased with worry that no child should carry. Jake followed, dragging a stick he'd been using as a pretend sword. They understood more than she wished they did about their situation. Last night, she'd caught them whispering about whether they'd have to live in their car like the family they'd seen on the news. Rebecca's hands were raw and bleeding by midday, but she pushed forward. The field needed to be ready for planting if they had any hope of a harvest. She'd sold almost everything of value, including her wedding ring, to buy seeds and keep the electricity on. The twins shared a peanut butter sandwich for lunch while she pretended she wasn't hungry. Every bite they took was more important than her own needs. When Emma asked why Mommy wasn't eating, Rebecca smiled and said she'd already had hers. The plow caught on a rock and jerked violently, sending Rebecca stumbling backward. She landed hard, crying out as pain shot through her back and belly. The twins rushed over, their faces pale with fear. Emma's small hands shook as she helped her mother sit up, while Jake ran to get more water. Rebecca felt a tightening in her abdomen that made her breath catch. She couldn't go into labor now, not when they were so far from town and she had no way to pay for medical care. As afternoon shadows lengthened, a cloud of dust appeared on the horizon. Rebecca shielded her eyes, watching a black pickup truck approach down their long dirt driveway. She didn't recognize the vehicle, and unexpected visitors usually meant more bad news. The twins moved closer to her, sensing her tension. Rebecca struggled to her feet, brushing dirt from her maternity dress and trying to look more composed than she felt. Whatever this was about, she'd face it standing up. The truck stopped near their makeshift fence, and a tall man in a cowboy hat stepped out. Even from a distance, Rebecca could see he was well-dressed, his boots polished and his shirt crisp despite the heat. He moved with the confident stride of someone accustomed to being in charge, and Rebecca's heart sank. Rich men in fancy trucks usually came bearing eviction notices or legal papers. She placed protective hands on her children's shoulders and prepared for another fight she couldn't win. Marcus Thornton had been driving back from a cattle auction when he spotted the struggling woman in the field. Something about the scene tugged at his conscience in a way he hadn't felt in years. His own ranch sprawled across thousands of acres just 5 miles down the road, employing dozens of workers and generating more income than he could spend in a lifetime. Yet here was this pregnant woman, obviously alone and working herself to exhaustion on a patch of land that looked ready to blow away in the next strong wind. He'd heard about the Martinez family from his foreman, who'd mentioned that the widow was trying to keep her husband's farm running. Marcus had built his fortune by being practical and unsentimental, but watching those two small children hover protectively around their mother stirred something unexpected in his chest. His own childhood had been one of privilege and comfort, but he remembered the stories his grandfather told about the Great Depression, when neighbors looked out for each other because survival depended on community. As Marcus approached the family, he noticed the woman's defensive posture and the way the children positioned themselves slightly behind her. He'd seen that same wariness in the eyes of cornered animals, and it made him slow his steps and soften his expression. These people had been hurt before, probably recently, and his expensive truck and clothes weren't helping his case. He removed his hat as he got closer, a gesture of respect his mother had drilled into him decades ago. Rebecca lifted her chin defiantly as the stranger approached, though her hands trembled slightly. Up close, she could see he was younger than she'd first thought, maybe in his early 40s, with kind eyes that didn't match the intimidating wealth displayed in his appearance. Still, she'd learned not to trust first impressions. Rich men often seemed charming right before they delivered devastating news. She pulled the twins closer and waited for him to speak, determined not to show weakness even though exhaustion made her sway on her feet. Marcus stopped a respectful distance away and gestured toward the field. "Ma'am, I couldn't help but notice you're working this land pretty much single-handed. I'm Marcus Thornton from the Triple T Ranch down the road. I was wondering if you might need some help." His voice was gentle, without the condescending tone she'd grown accustomed to from bank officers and social workers. Rebecca studied his face, searching for hidden motives, but found only genuine concern that confused and unnerved her. "We're managing just fine," Rebecca replied, though the words felt hollow even to her own ears. Emma tugged on her mother's dress, and Rebecca glanced down to see her daughter pointing at the blood on her hands. She quickly hid them behind her back, but not before Marcus noticed the injuries. His jaw tightened slightly, and Rebecca braced herself for judgment or pity. Instead, he simply nodded and looked out over the partially plowed field with the eye of someone who understood farming. "That's good to hear," Marcus said diplomatically. "This is nice land you've got here. Your husband must have had a good eye for soil quality." The mention of David made Rebecca's chest tighten, but she appreciated that this stranger spoke of her husband with respect rather than treating his death as just another tragic statistic. Most people either avoided mentioning David entirely or spoke about him with the careful tone, reserved for discussing disasters. The twins had been watching the exchange with wide eyes, but Jake's natural curiosity finally overcame his shyness. "Are you a real cowboy?" he asked, stepping forward to get a better look at Marcus's hat and boots. Marcus smiled and crouched down to Jake's level, making himself less imposing. "I suppose I am, partner. I raise cattle and horses on my ranch. Do you like animals?" Jake nodded enthusiastically, and even Emma crept closer, drawn by Marcus's easy manner with her brother. Rebecca watched the interaction with mixed emotions. The twins had been so serious lately, carrying burdens no children should bear, and seeing them respond to kindness reminded her how much they'd lost along with their father. But she couldn't afford to let her guard down, especially not with someone whose help would inevitably come with strings attached. Rich men didn't stop by failing farms out of the goodness of their hearts, and she wouldn't let her children be disappointed again when reality set in. Marcus noticed Rebecca's continued wariness and stood slowly, not wanting to spook her further. He'd dealt with enough skittish animals to recognize the signs of someone who'd been pushed too far too often. "I tell you what," he said casually, "I've got a crew finishing up some fence repairs on the north section of my property. They'll be done by tomorrow, and I hate to see good workers sitting idle. Would you mind terribly if I sent a couple of them over to help you finish this field? No charge, of course. Consider it a neighborly gesture." The offer was tempting beyond words, but Rebecca had learned that nothing in life was truly free. "What's the catch?" she asked bluntly, surprising herself with her directness. Marcus chuckled, and the sound was warm rather than mocking. "No catch, Mrs. Martinez. Sometimes people just need help, and sometimes other people are in a position to provide it. My grandfather always said that what goes around comes around, and I've been on the receiving end of good fortune more often than I probably deserve." Rebecca wanted to refuse on principle, but the thought of finishing the plowing without destroying her body or risking premature labor was too appealing to dismiss outright. "I can't pay you," she said quietly, adding how the admission made her feel small. Marcus shook his head immediately. "I'm not asking you to. Look, I know we just met, but I lost my own father when I was not much older than these two. I remember how hard it was for my mother, even with money and family to help. You're doing something incredible here, trying to keep your husband's dream alive while raising two kids and expecting another. That takes more courage than most people have." His words hit harder than Rebecca expected, and she felt tears threatening to spill over. She'd been so focused on survival that she hadn't stopped to think about courage or dreams. Most days felt like a series of small defeats punctuated by the twins' needs and her growing fear about the future. "I don't know what to say," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. Marcus smiled gently and settled his hat back on his head. "Just say yes, ma'am. Let someone help for once." Emma had been watching the adults talk with the intense focus that children develop when they sense important decisions being made. She tugged on Rebecca's dress again and whispered something urgent in her mother's ear. Rebecca bent down to listen, and Emma said loudly enough for Marcus to hear, "Mama, your hands are bleeding worse, and the baby's been making you hurt all day. Maybe the nice cowboy really wants to help." Out of the mouths of babes, Rebecca thought, feeling her last resistance crumble. "All right," Rebecca said finally, meeting Marcus's eyes with a mixture of gratitude and lingering suspicion. "But just the plowing. I won't accept charity beyond that." Marcus nodded solemnly, understanding that her pride was all she had left and refusing to take that from her too. "Just the plowing," he agreed. "My boys will be here first thing tomorrow morning. They're good workers and they'll treat your land with respect." He tipped his hat to her, and the children before walking back to his truck, leaving Rebecca standing in the field wondering if she'd just made a terrible mistake or caught her first lucky break in months. As Marcus drove away, Rebecca sank down onto a fallen log, suddenly exhausted beyond measure. The twins settled beside her, Emma taking one of her sore hands and Jake leaning against her arm. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the dust from the truck settle back onto the road. For the first time in weeks, Rebecca felt a tiny spark of hope flickering in her chest. Maybe, just maybe, they were going to be okay. The next morning arrived gray and cool, with the promise of rain in the heavy clouds gathering on the horizon. Rebecca had barely slept, alternating between excitement about getting help and worry about what Marcus Thornton might really want in return. She dressed carefully in her least stained maternity dress and braided her hair back neatly, wanting to look respectable when his workers arrived. The twins had been up since dawn, pressing their faces to the window and asking every few minutes if the cowboys were coming yet. At exactly 7 o'clock, two pickup trucks rumbled up the driveway, followed by a trailer carrying a large tractor and modern plowing equipment. Rebecca's heart sank a little at the sight of the expensive machinery. Her own ancient plow looked pitiful in comparison, and she wondered what these professional ranch hands would think of her amateur attempts at farming. She stepped outside with the twins flanking her, determined to maintain some dignity even if she felt completely out of her depth. The lead truck's door opened, and a weathered man in his 50s climbed out, followed by a younger worker who couldn't have been much past 20. Both men removed their hats as they approached, and the older one extended his hand with a respectful nod. "Ma'am, I'm Bill Rodriguez, foreman at the Triple T. This here's Tommy Walsh. Mr. Thornton sent us to help with your plowing, if that's still agreeable to you." His manner was courteous but not condescending, treating her as an equal rather than a charity case. Rebecca shook both men's hands, grateful for their straightforward approach. "I'm Rebecca Martinez, and these are my children, Emma and Jake. I really appreciate you coming out here." She gestured toward the partially completed field, feeling embarrassed by how little progress she'd made despite days of back-breaking work. Bill followed her gaze and nodded approvingly. "You've made a good start, ma'am. This is quality soil and your furrows are straight as arrows. Your husband taught you well." The compliment meant more to Rebecca than Bill could have known. David had spent countless evenings walking her through the basics of farming, sharing his dreams of building something lasting for their family. "He was a good teacher," she said softly, then cleared her throat and tried to focus on practical matters. "How long do you think it will take to finish?" Bill walked the field's perimeter quickly, his experienced eye calculating the work involved. "With our equipment, we should have you completely ready for planting by this afternoon, weather permitting." Tommy had been unloading the tractor with quiet efficiency, but he looked up at the mention of weather. "Those clouds are looking pretty serious, Bill. Think we should wait?" The foreman studied the sky and shook his head. "We'll work as long as we can. This lady needs to get her crop in the ground, and Mr. Thornton doesn't pay us to sit around avoiding a little rain." Rebecca felt a rush of gratitude toward Marcus for sending workers who understood the urgency of her situation. As the men prepared their equipment, Emma approached Tommy shyly and asked if she could watch him work. The young man's face lit up with a smile that reminded Rebecca painfully of David's easy way with children. "Sure thing, miss. Just stay back where it's safe, and I'll explain what we're doing." Soon both twins were following Tommy around like devoted puppies, asking endless questions about tractors and farming that he answered with patience and genuine enthusiasm. Rebecca found herself relaxing for the first time in months as she watched her children laugh and learn from someone who clearly enjoyed teaching them. Bill worked with the smooth efficiency of decades of experience, covering more ground in an hour than she'd managed in 3 days. The modern tractor made her old plow look like a museum piece, but neither man made her feel foolish for trying to work with inferior tools. Instead, they treated her efforts with respect and built upon what she'd already accomplished. By midday, the field was nearly complete, and Rebecca had prepared sandwiches and lemonade for the workers. She'd used the last of her good lunch meat, but seeing the twins animated and happy made the expense worthwhile. Bill and Tommy ate with obvious appreciation, complimenting her cooking and including the children in their conversation about ranch life and farming techniques. Emma announced that she wanted to be a cowgirl when she grew up, while Jake declared his intention to own the biggest tractor in Montana. The first drops of rain began falling just as Tommy finished the final section of the field. Bill quickly secured the equipment while Rebecca hurried the twins inside, but not before Emma had gotten thoroughly muddy splashing in the newly formed puddles. The little girl's giggles echoed through the house as Rebecca helped her change clothes, and the sound was so normal and carefree that it brought tears to her mother's eyes. When had laughter become such a rare commodity in their home? As the workers prepared to leave, Bill handed Rebecca a business card with Marcus's personal number written on the back. "Mr. Thornton wanted you to have this in case you need anything else. He said to tell you that good neighbors look out for each other, and that includes you now." Rebecca studied the card, still struggling to believe that someone with no obligation to help them had gone to such trouble. "Please tell him thank you from all of us," she said, meaning every word. Tommy knelt down to say goodbye to the twins, promising to bring them pictures of the horses next time he visited. Emma hugged him fiercely, and Jake shook his hand with the seriousness of a business transaction. As the trucks pulled away, Rebecca stood on her porch watching them go, feeling lighter than she had since David's death. The field stretched before them, perfectly prepared and ready for the seeds that would determine their future. For the first time in months, that future looked like it might include hope. That evening, as Rebecca tucked the twins into bed, they chattered excitedly about their day with the Cowboys and made her promise to plant the crops tomorrow. She kissed them good night and walked back to the kitchen, where she sat at the table and stared at Marcus's business card. Part of her wanted to call and thank him properly, but another part worried about encouraging more contact with someone whose motives she still didn't fully understand. Rich men didn't usually invest time and resources in struggling widows without expecting something in return. Rebecca made herself a cup of tea and stepped onto the front porch, listening to the gentle rain pattering on the metal roof. The sound had always been comforting to her, a reminder that nature provided what people needed if they were patient and prepared to receive it. Tonight, the rain felt like a blessing on the freshly prepared soil, soaking deep into the earth and creating the perfect conditions for new growth. Maybe that was exactly what all of them needed. The following week passed in a blur of activity as Rebecca threw herself into planting with an energy she hadn't felt in months. The professionally prepared field made all the difference, allowing her to work efficiently despite her advancing pregnancy. Emma and Jake helped by carrying water and keeping her company, their earlier excitement about the Cowboys evolving into genuine interest in farming. Rebecca found herself sharing stories about their father's dreams for the land, and the twins listened with rapt attention to tales of the man they were already beginning to forget. On Thursday morning, Marcus's truck appeared in the driveway again, causing the twins to abandon their breakfast and rush to the window. Rebecca felt her pulse quicken, though whether from anxiety or anticipation, she couldn't say. She'd been wondering when he would return to check on their progress, and she'd rehearsed several speeches thanking him for his help. None of them seemed adequate when faced with the reality of his presence, however, and she found herself tongue-tied as he approached with that same easy confidence she remembered. "Morning, Mrs. Martinez," Marcus said, tipping his hat as the twins burst through the screen door to greet him. "I was in the neighborhood and thought I'd see how the planting went. Bill said you had perfect weather for it." His casual tone put Rebecca at ease, and she found herself smiling genuinely for the first time in his presence. "It went beautifully, thanks to your men's work. Would you like to see what we've accomplished?" She led him toward the field, pride evident in her voice as she pointed out the neat rows of emerging seedlings. Marcus walked the field's edge with the same careful attention Bill had shown, nodding approvingly at the healthy-looking plants. "You've done excellent work here. These rows are as straight as any I've seen, and the spacing is perfect. Your husband would be proud." The compliment brought a lump to Rebecca's throat, but she managed to thank him without breaking down. Emma tugged on Marcus's sleeve and launched into a detailed explanation of how they'd planted each row, her enthusiasm making him smile broadly. "Uncle Marcus, will you come see our chickens?" Jake asked suddenly, using a title that made both adults pause. Rebecca started to correct him, but Marcus held up a gentle hand. "I'd be honored to meet your chickens, partner," he said seriously, allowing Jake to take his hand and lead him toward the small coop behind the house. Rebecca followed, wondering when her children had decided to adopt this virtual stranger as family, and why the idea didn't alarm her as much as it should have. The chickens were Rebecca's pride and joy, the one part of farm life she'd mastered completely. She'd built the coop herself from scrap lumber, and the 6 hens provided enough eggs to supplement their limited diet. Marcus examined her handiwork with obvious respect, asking technical questions about ventilation and predator protection that showed he understood small-scale farming as well as large ranch operations. "This is impressive work," he said genuinely. "You've got a real talent for this." As they walked back toward the house, Marcus seemed to be working up to saying something important. Finally, he stopped and turned to face Rebecca directly. "Ma'am, I hope you won't take this the wrong way, but I've been thinking about your situation. I know you're managing well on your own, but winter's coming, and this land is going to need more work than one person can handle, especially with a new baby on the way. I'd like to propose something that might benefit both of us." Rebecca tensed immediately, her hard-won trust beginning to evaporate. Here it comes, she thought, the real reason for his help. "What kind of proposal?" she asked carefully, unconsciously moving closer to her children. Marcus seemed to sense her shift in mood and chose his words carefully. "I need someone to manage a small operation for me, someone who understands farming and isn't afraid of hard work. The job would come with a house, health insurance, and a steady salary. You'd be helping me while keeping your family together and secure." The offer was so unexpected that Rebecca found herself speechless. She'd been braced for a proposition that would compromise her dignity or independence, not a legitimate job opportunity. "What kind of operation?" she managed to ask, though her mind was reeling with possibilities. Marcus smiled, seeming relieved by her interested tone. "I've been wanting to diversify beyond cattle for a while now. Start a small organic farming operation, maybe some specialty crops for the local restaurants. I've got the land and the capital, but I need someone with the knowledge and passion to make it work." Rebecca's heart began to race as she processed what he was offering. A real job with benefits and security, doing work she was learning to love. It seemed too good to be true, which in her experience meant it probably was. "Why me?" she asked bluntly. You don't really know anything about my abilities beyond what you've seen in the last week. Marcus nodded, appreciating her directness. That's true, but sometimes you can tell more about a person from how they handle adversity than from any resume. You've been fighting to keep your family together and honor your husband's memory under impossible circumstances. That tells me everything I need to know about your character. Emma had been listening intently to the adult conversation, her 6-year-old mind picking up on the emotional undercurrents, even if she didn't understand all the details. She moved closer to her mother and whispered loudly, "Mama, does this mean we wouldn't have to leave our house?" The innocent question cut straight to the heart of Rebecca's fears and made Marcus's jaw tighten with understanding. He hadn't fully grasped how close to disaster this family really was. "You're facing foreclosure," Marcus said quietly, not making it a question. Rebecca's cheeks burned with shame, but she nodded anyway. There was no point in hiding their situation now. "We have about 6 weeks before the bank takes the farm. I've been trying to find a way to make the payments, but with the baby coming and medical bills from David's accident." She trailed off, unable to finish the sentence that would admit complete defeat. Marcus was quiet for a long moment, his expression thoughtful rather than pitying. When he spoke, his voice was gentle but firm. "Here's what I'd like to propose. Come work for me, and I'll buy this property from the bank. You can live here rent-free while you manage my farming operation, and if things work out well, I'll sell the land back to you at cost when you're financially ready. Your children can grow up on their father's land, and you can build the life he dreamed of for your family." The generosity of the offer took Rebecca's breath away, but it also triggered every warning bell she possessed. "That's incredibly kind, but I can't accept that much help from someone I barely know. What if it doesn't work out? What if I'm not as good at this as you think I am?" Marcus smiled at her concerns, recognizing the pride and fear behind them. "Then we'll figure it out together. But I don't think that's going to be a problem. You've already proven you can handle more adversity than most people face in a lifetime." Jake had been unusually quiet during the adult conversation, but now he stepped forward with the earnest expression he wore when wrestling with big concepts. "Are you going to be our new daddy?" he asked Marcus directly, making both adults freeze in surprise. Rebecca felt her face flame with embarrassment, but Marcus crouched down to Jake's level with perfect seriousness. "No, partner. Your daddy was a special man, and nobody could ever replace him. But I'd be honored to be your friend and help your mama take care of your family." The answer seemed to satisfy Jake, who nodded solemnly and then brightened considerably. "Can we still see the horses at your ranch?" Marcus laughed and ruffled the boy's hair. "Absolutely. In fact, if your mama says yes to my job offer, you'll probably get tired of seeing horses." Emma clapped her hands excitedly at this prospect, already imagining herself as the cowgirl she'd decided to become. Rebecca watched her children's faces light up with hope and felt her last reservations crumbling. "I need time to think about this," Rebecca said finally, though her heart was already pulling her toward acceptance. Marcus stood and nodded respectfully. Of course you do. This is a big decision and you should take as long as you need. But don't wait too long to decide about the foreclosure situation. Those things move fast once they get started, and I'd hate for you to lose your options. He handed her another business card, this one with his attorney's information. If you decide you're interested, have a lawyer review everything. I want you to feel completely comfortable with the arrangement. As Marcus prepared to leave, the twins extracted promises for another visit soon, and Rebecca found herself hoping he'd keep those promises regardless of her decision about his job offer. She'd grown accustomed to disappointment over the past year, but something about Marcus felt different. He didn't make her feel like a charity case or a victim to be pitied. Instead, he treated her like a capable woman who'd been dealt a tough hand and deserved a chance to play it well. That night, after the children were asleep, Rebecca sat at her kitchen table with a legal pad and tried to make a list of pros and cons about Marcus's offer. The pro column filled up quickly. Steady income, health insurance, keeping the farm, giving her children stability and hope. The con column was harder to populate, mainly because most of her concerns weren't rational. She was afraid of depending on someone else's kindness, afraid of what would happen when Marcus inevitably realized she wasn't worth the investment he was proposing to make. Rebecca rubbed her swollen belly and felt the baby kick restlessly, as if sensing her agitation. In 6 weeks, she'd have 3 children to support instead of 2, and her options would become even more limited. Pride was a luxury she could no longer afford, not when her children's futures were at stake. She looked around the modest kitchen where David had kissed her goodbye for the last time, where Emma had taken her first steps, where Jake had announced he wanted to be a farmer like Daddy. This house held all their memories and dreams. Maybe it was worth swallowing her pride to keep it. The next morning brought a phone call that made Rebecca's decision for her. The bank's representative was crisp and unsympathetic, as he informed her that they'd moved up the foreclosure timeline due to her missed payments. She now had 3 weeks instead of 6 to come up with the full amount owed, plus penalties and legal fees. The total was staggering, more money than she could hope to raise in 3 months, let alone 3 weeks. She hung up the phone with shaking hands and immediately reached for Marcus's business card. Marcus answered on the second ring, his voice warm and concerned when he heard the panic in hers. "I'd like to accept your job offer," Rebecca said without preamble, "but I need to know if you're serious about buying the farm from the bank. They've accelerated the foreclosure, and I'm running out of time." There was a brief pause, and Rebecca held her breath, afraid he'd changed his mind or never been serious about such a generous arrangement. "I'll call my attorney right now," Marcus said firmly. "We'll get this handled before the bank can take any action. Don't worry about anything except taking care of yourself and those bobbies. I've got this covered." His confidence was infectious, and Rebecca felt some of the crushing weight lift from her shoulders. For the first time since David's death, she wasn't facing her problems alone. The realization was both terrifying and liberating. The legal proceedings moved with surprising speed once Marcus's attorney got involved. Within a week, the farm's ownership had transferred to Marcus, and Rebecca found herself signing an employment contract that was more generous than anything she dared to hope for. The salary was modest but steady, the health insurance was comprehensive, and the lease-to-own arrangement for the farm was structured to be achievable within 5 years if she proved successful at the job. Emma and Jake were over the moon when Rebecca explained that they wouldn't be moving after all, that the nice cowboy was going to help them stay on Daddy's farm and learn to be real farmers. They spent the evening making plans for all the things they'd do once the baby came, and Mama wasn't so tired all the time. Rebecca listened to their excited chatter and felt a sense of peace she'd almost forgotten was possible. Maybe they really were going to be okay. Marcus arrived the following Monday with a small crew of workers and several loads of equipment. Rebecca watched from her porch as they unloaded everything needed to convert the unused portion of her land into a proper organic farming operation. The investment was substantial, clearly representing thousands of dollars in infrastructure and startup costs. The magnitude of Marcus's commitment to their success was both humbling and motivating. "Ready to get started, boss?" Marcus asked with a grin as he approached the porch. The title made Rebecca laugh despite her nervousness. She'd never been anyone's boss before, but she was determined to prove worthy of his faith in her abilities. "I think so," she said, settling her hand on her belly as the baby kicked in apparent agreement. "Though I should probably warn you that I might need a few breaks over the next month or so." Marcus's expression grew concerned as he really looked at her for the first time that morning. Rebecca's face was pale, and she was breathing more heavily than the short walk from the house warranted. "Are you feeling all right? Maybe we should take things slow for a while, focus on planning rather than physical work." Rebecca started to protest that she was fine, but another sharp kick from the baby made her wince visibly. "Actually," she admitted reluctantly, "I haven't been sleeping well and the baby's been more active than usual. My back's been aching something fierce." Marcus frowned and gently guided her toward one of the porch chairs. "When's the last time you saw a doctor?" he asked, and Rebecca's embarrassed silence told him everything he needed to know. "We're fixing that right now. Emma, Jake, how would you like to take a ride into town with your mama and me?" The trip to the rural health clinic was Rebecca's first real glimpse into how dramatically her life had changed. Marcus's presence and insurance card opened doors that had been firmly closed to her before, and the doctor who examined her was thorough and attentive rather than rushed and dismissive. The news was concerning but not catastrophic. Rebecca was showing signs of preterm labor and needed immediate bed rest to give the baby the best chance of reaching full term. Bed rest, Rebecca repeated incredulously. I can't do bed rest. I have a farm to run and children to take care of. The doctor, a kind woman in her 50s, smiled sympathetically but remained firm. Mrs. Martinez, you're at 34 weeks with a history of stress and inadequate nutrition. If you want this baby to be born healthy, you need to prioritize rest over everything else for the next few weeks. Rebecca looked helplessly at Marcus, wondering if he'd regret his job offer now that she couldn't fulfill her obligations. Instead, Marcus stepped forward with quiet determination. Don't worry about the farm or the kids. We'll figure this out together. He turned to the doctor with the focused attention he usually reserved for business negotiations. What exactly does bed rest mean, and what can we do to support her through this? Rebecca listened as he took charge of her medical care with the same efficiency he'd brought to saving her farm, and she felt tears of gratitude and relief threatening to overflow. The next few weeks passed in a surreal haze of forced inactivity and overwhelming support. Marcus had hired Mrs. Patterson, a local woman who specialized in household help during medical emergencies, to stay with Rebecca during the day while he worked. The twins adjusted to their new routine with remarkable resilience, playing quietly near their mother's bed and helping Mrs. Patterson with simple tasks that made them feel important and useful. Marcus stopped by every evening to check on Rebecca's progress and update her on the farm's development. He'd moved forward with the organic certification process and planted several test crops that would provide valuable data for future planning. His workers had constructed a small greenhouse and irrigation system that would allow for year-round production, turning Rebecca's modest farm into a legitimate agricultural operation. The scope of his investment continued to amaze her. You're spending a fortune on this place, Rebecca observed one evening as Marcus described the latest improvements. What if I'm not ready to handle all this responsibility once the baby comes? Marcus settled into the chair beside her bed with the patient expression she'd come to associate with his responses to her self-doubt. Then we'll adjust our timeline and expectations. This isn't about creating pressure for you, Rebecca. It's about creating opportunities. The baby decided to make an appearance on a crisp October morning, 3 weeks before her due date, but healthy and strong despite the early arrival. Rebecca had felt the first contractions just after dawn, and Marcus had appeared at her door within minutes of her phone call, as if he'd been waiting for the summons. He'd driven her to the hospital with steady competence while Mrs. Patterson stayed with the twins, promising they'd meet their new sibling soon. Little Grace Martinez entered the world with a lusty cry that announced her determination to be heard, and Rebecca fell in love instantly with the tiny, perfect person who looked so much like David it took her breath away. Marcus waited respectfully in the hallway until Rebecca was ready for visitors. then entered with a massive bouquet of flowers and genuine tears in his eyes as he met the newest member of their unconventional family. "She's beautiful," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. The twins were beside themselves with excitement when they finally got to meet their baby sister. Emma immediately declared herself Grace's protector and personal assistant, while Jake studied the tiny baby with fascination and announced that she was much smaller than the calves at Marcus's ranch, but probably just as important. Their innocent acceptance of Grace as a precious addition to their family made Rebecca's heart swell with love and gratitude. Recovery was easier this time, helped by proper medical care and the absence of crushing financial worry. Rebecca had a comfortable room, excellent nursing staff, and visitors who brought love and support rather than stress and obligation. Marcus had quietly arranged for meals to be delivered to her room from the best restaurant in town, and Mrs. Patterson had transformed the farmhouse into a welcoming nursery complete with everything a new mother could need. When Rebecca brought Grace home 3 days later, she was amazed by the changes that had taken place in her absence. The house sparkled with cleanliness, the refrigerator was stocked with nutritious food, and a beautiful wooden cradle sat beside her bed, handcrafted by one of Marcus's ranch workers who specialized in woodworking. The twins had helped decorate the nursery with drawings and flowers, creating a warm, loving environment for their sister's homecoming. Marcus gave Rebecca 2 full months to recover and bond with Grace before gently suggesting they begin planning the spring planting season. The winter months had been kind to their small family, with regular visits from Marcus and his extended ranch family, who had unofficially adopted the Martinez clan. Emma and Jake spent countless hours at the Triple T Ranch, learning to ride horses and help with daily chores under the patient supervision of Bill and the other cowboys. The children thrived under this combination of stability and adventure, their earlier trauma gradually fading as they embraced their new reality. Emma had become fearless on horseback, racing across the pastures with the confidence of someone born to ranch life. Jake had developed an impressive knowledge of farming equipment and could identify different types of cattle from remarkable distances. Both children spoke of Marcus with the easy affection they might have shown a beloved uncle or family friend. Rebecca found herself settling into a routine that felt sustainable for the first time since David's death. Her days were structured around Grace's needs, but also included meaningful work planning the organic farming operation that would launch in earnest come spring. Marcus consulted her on every decision, treating her opinions with respect and implementing her suggestions with enthusiasm. She was truly the boss of their agricultural venture, not just in title but in practice. The partnership between Rebecca and Marcus had evolved into something neither of them had expected when they first met in that dusty field. They worked together with the easy rhythm of people who understood and trusted each other, their different strengths complementing perfectly. Marcus brought business acumen and financial resources, while Rebecca contributed agricultural knowledge and an intuitive understanding of what the land needed to flourish. Their personal relationship remained carefully professional, though both were aware of an underlying current of attraction and affection that neither chose to acknowledge openly. Rebecca was still grieving her husband and learning to navigate single motherhood, while Marcus respected her need for emotional space and time to heal. They were friends and business partners, nothing more, though the children clearly hoped for something deeper to develop between the adults they'd claimed as family. Spring arrived with unusual warmth, and Rebecca threw herself into the planting season with renewed energy and purpose. Grace was a contented baby who seemed to enjoy being outdoors, napping peacefully in a portable crib, while her mother worked in the greenhouse or supervised the field operations. The organic certification had come through during the winter, and their first official crop would be a diverse mixture of heirloom vegetables destined for high-end restaurants in the nearest city. The work was challenging but rewarding, requiring Rebecca to draw on everything David had taught her, while learning new techniques specific to organic farming. Marcus had hired 2 additional workers specifically for the agricultural operation, both of whom treated Rebecca as their supervisor with genuine respect. She discovered she had a natural talent for leadership, able to coordinate complex planting schedules while maintaining the quality standards necessary for organic certification. By midsummer, the farm was flourishing beyond anyone's most optimistic projections. The vegetables were beautiful and abundant, and the restaurant contracts Marcus had secured were eager for more product than they could currently supply. Local farmers' markets had begun requesting their produce, and food bloggers were writing enthusiastic reviews of dishes prepared with vegetables from the Martinez Thornton Organic Farm. Rebecca felt proud of what they'd accomplished together. The success brought its own challenges, however. Rebecca found herself working longer hours as demand increased, and the combination of physical labor and caring for an infant was beginning to take its toll. Marcus noticed her exhaustion before she acknowledged it herself, gently suggesting they hire additional help for both the farm operations and childcare. Rebecca's first instinct was to refuse, but Grace's needs and the farm's success made the decision for her. Mrs. Patterson was delighted to expand her role from temporary helper to permanent nanny and housekeeper, and her presence freed Rebecca to focus more fully on the agricultural aspects of their operation. The twins adored Mrs. Patterson, who told wonderful stories and baked cookies that rivaled anything they'd ever tasted. Grace seemed to sense the older woman's competence and gentleness, settling into her arms with the trust that comes naturally to well-loved bobbies. August brought the first major harvest, and Rebecca worked alongside Marcus and their crew to bring in crops that exceeded every expectation for quality and yield. The financial returns were substantial enough to cover all operating expenses plus a significant profit, validating Marcus's investment and Rebecca's management decisions. More importantly, the success proved that their unconventional partnership could create something meaningful and sustainable. The harvest celebration that evening was spontaneous and joyful, with the entire crew gathering on Rebecca's front porch to share a meal prepared from their own produce. Emma and Jake helped serve food to the adults who had become their extended family, while Grace gurgled contentedly in Marcus's arms as he told stories about the day's work. Rebecca watched the scene with deep satisfaction, recognizing that they'd created something precious and rare. As autumn approached, Rebecca and Marcus began planning for the following year's expansion. The success of their first season had attracted attention from agricultural extension agents and sustainable farming advocates, leading to requests for tour and speaking engagements. Rebecca discovered she enjoyed sharing their story and teaching others about organic farming techniques, adding another dimension to her role in their growing operation. The twins were thriving academically and socially, their confidence boosted by the stability and opportunities their new life provided. Emma had joined the local 4-H club and was raising a calf for next year's county fair, while Jake was already planning his science fair project around soil composition and plant growth. Both children spoke easily about their father's memory, while embracing their present circumstances with enthusiasm and gratitude. Marcus had become such a constant presence in their lives that Rebecca sometimes forgot their relationship had begun as a business arrangement. He attended school events for the twins, helped with homework when his schedule allowed, and had developed the kind of easy parenting partnership with Rebecca that many married couples never achieved. Yet they maintained careful boundaries around their personal relationship, neither wanting to complicate the professional success they'd built together. The second harvest season was even more successful than the first, with expanded acreage and additional crop varieties that commanded premium prices from their restaurant clients. Rebecca had developed a reputation as an innovative organic farmer, and agricultural magazines were requesting interviews about their sustainable practices and business model. The attention was flattering, but also slightly overwhelming for someone who'd been fighting for survival just 2 years earlier. Winter brought time for reflection and planning, and Rebecca found herself taking stock of how dramatically her life had changed. The financial security she'd never dared hope for was now firmly established, with the farm's profits allowing her to begin making payments toward eventually owning the land outright. More importantly, her children were happy and healthy, growing up with opportunities and experiences that honored David's memory while creating new traditions. Grace was walking now, a determined toddler who followed her older siblings everywhere and showed signs of inheriting the family's love for farming. She delighted in helping Emma collect eggs from the chickens and squealed with joy when Jake showed her the different vegetables growing in the greenhouse. Marcus had built her a small playground behind the house, complete with a sandbox and swing set that became the center of many family gatherings. The relationship between Rebecca and Marcus had deepened into something that transcended their original business arrangement, though neither had formally acknowledged the change. They functioned as partners in every sense of the word, making decisions together about the children's futures and the farm's direction with the kind of trust and communication that comes from shared values and genuine respect. The attraction that had always simmered beneath the surface remained unspoken, but increasingly difficult to ignore. Emma, now 8 and remarkably perceptive, had begun making pointed observations about how happy Marcus seemed when he was with their family, and how much happier her mother had become since the nice cowboy started helping them. Jake, approaching 7 and equally observant in his own way, had taken to introducing Marcus as my mom's friend who helps us with everything and makes her smile. Their innocent comments often left both adults flustered and searching for ways to change the subject. The third growing season brought new challenges and opportunities as their reputation continued to grow. Agricultural universities were requesting research partnerships, and government agencies were citing their operation as a model for sustainable small farm success. Rebecca found herself traveling occasionally to speak at conferences and workshops, always returning home with new ideas and renewed appreciation for the life they'd built together. Marcus had quietly restructured their business arrangement to reflect Rebecca's increased responsibilities and the operation's growing profitability. She was now a full partner in the agricultural venture, rather than just an employee, with ownership stakes that would provide long-term financial security for her family. The generosity of his gesture was typical of the man who'd first stopped to help a struggling pregnant woman in a dusty field. But it still moved Rebecca to tears when she fully understood what he'd done. The children were growing into confident, capable young people who moved easily between their farm life and their broader community involvement. Emma had become a skilled horsewoman and was competing successfully in local rodeo events, while Jake had developed into something of a mechanical prodigy who could repair farm equipment with startling competence. Grace, now 2, was everyone's darling, equally at home with ranch hands and restaurant owners who visited the farm. As the 4th anniversary of David's death approached, Rebecca realized she was no longer the desperate widow who'd been plowing fields alone while fighting to save her family's future. She was a successful businesswoman, a confident mother, and a valued member of her community. The transformation had been gradual but complete, built on hard work, Marcus's generous support, and the love of people who'd chosen to become family rather than being born to it. The memorial service for David had become an annual tradition, a quiet celebration of his life and dreams held in the field where Rebecca had first met Marcus. This year, As she stood surrounded by her children and the extended family they'd created, Rebecca felt David's approval for the choices she'd made and the life she'd built from the ashes of their original dreams. The farm was thriving, the children were happy, and she'd found peace with both her past and her future. Marcus stood slightly apart from the family group during the memorial, respecting the solemnity of the occasion while providing his quiet support. When the formal remembrance ended and the children ran off to play, he approached Rebecca with the gentle expression he wore during their most serious conversations. "David would be proud of what you've accomplished," he said simply, and Rebecca nodded, knowing he was right. "He'd be proud of what we've accomplished," she corrected gently, recognizing that their partnership had created something neither could have achieved alone. Marcus smiled at her correction, understanding the significance of her choice to include him in David's legacy. They stood together in comfortable silence, watching their children play in the golden afternoon light, both aware that something fundamental had shifted in their relationship. That evening, after the children were asleep and the house had settled into quiet, Rebecca found Marcus sitting on the front porch steps, looking out over the land they'd transformed together. She joined him without speaking, settling beside him with the ease of long familiarity. The night was warm and still, filled with the sounds of crickets and the distant lowing of cattle from his ranch. It was a perfect evening for important conversations. "Marcus," Rebecca began, then stopped, suddenly uncertain how to express what she was feeling. He turned to look at her, his expression patient and encouraging. "I've been thinking about David's memorial today and about how much our lives have changed since we first met. I know this started as a business arrangement, but somewhere along the way it became something more, at least for me." Her heart pounded as she made the admission that had been building for months. Marcus was quiet for a long moment, and Rebecca began to fear she'd misread the situation entirely. Then he reached for her hand, intertwining their fingers with gentle certainty. "For me too," he said quietly. "I've been waiting for you to be ready, hoping you might eventually feel the same way I do. I love you, Rebecca. I love all of you, and I have for a long time." His confession was simple and heartfelt, carrying the weight of genuine emotion rather than dramatic flourish. Rebecca felt tears of relief and joy spill over as she squeezed his hand. "I love you too, but I've been afraid to admit it even to myself. David was my first love, and I thought that meant he had to be my only love. But watching you with the children, seeing how you've supported us and believed in us, I've realized that love doesn't diminish when it's shared. It grows." Her words came in a rush, as if she'd been storing them up for years. They sat together on the porch steps, talking quietly about their feelings and their hopes for the future, until the first hints of dawn colored the horizon. There was no dramatic kiss or passionate declaration, just two people who'd found each other through adversity and built something beautiful together, acknowledging that their partnership had evolved into love. It was exactly the kind of quiet, solid foundation that could support a lifetime of happiness. The children's reaction to their announcement was predictably enthusiastic, with Emma immediately beginning to plan a wedding and Jake wanting to know if this meant Marcus would officially be their stepfather. Grace, too young to understand the adult conversation, simply climbed into Marcus's lap as she always did, secure in the love that surrounded her. The transition from business partners to engaged couple felt natural and right, the logical next step in a relationship that had always been about family. Their wedding was held the following spring in the same field where they'd first met, surrounded by the family and friends who'd supported them through their journey. Rebecca wore her grandmother's simple dress, altered to fit perfectly, while Marcus chose a suit that honored the formality of the occasion while remaining true to his ranch lifestyle. Emma and Jake served as maid of honor and best man, their faces glowing with happiness as they watched their mother marry the man who'd already been their father in every way that mattered. The ceremony was brief but meaningful, officiated by the pastor who'd buried David and christened Grace, lending continuity to the family story. When Marcus and Rebecca exchanged vows they'd written themselves, promising to continue building a life based on love, respect, and shared dreams, there wasn't a dry eye among their guests. Even the hardened ranch hands who worked for Marcus were visibly moved by the genuine emotion in the couple's voices. The reception celebration continued late into the evening, with dancing on a makeshift floor in the barn, and a feast prepared from produce grown on their own land. Emma performed a special song she'd written for the occasion, while Jake gave a speech that was both hilarious and heartfelt, thanking Marcus for making their family complete. Grace toddled between the guests, collecting hugs and treats while wearing a tiny dress that matched her mother's wedding gown. As the evening wound down and their guests began to depart, Rebecca and Marcus stood together watching their children play with the other young people who'd become part of their extended family. The farm stretched around them, productive and beautiful, a testament to what could be accomplished when good people supported each other through difficult times. The future looked bright and full of possibility, built on the solid foundation of love and partnership they'd created together. Years later, when people asked Rebecca about her story, she would always emphasize that real-life fairy tales don't happen overnight. They're built through daily choices to support each other, to work hard toward shared goals, and to create family bonds that transcend biology or circumstance. Her happy ending hadn't been handed to her by a wealthy cowboy who swept her off her feet, but earned through partnership with a good man who saw her potential and believed in her dreams. The Martinez Thornton farm became legendary in agricultural circles, not just for its innovative practices and financial success, but for the story of how it began with a desperate woman plowing fields alone and grew into a thriving family operation that employed dozens of people and fed thousands more. Emma eventually took over the organic farming operation, bringing her own innovations and expanding into sustainable livestock management. Jake became an agricultural engineer, designing equipment that helped small farms compete with industrial operations. Grace grew up surrounded by love and opportunity, never knowing poverty or insecurity, but understanding the value of hard work and community support. She became a teacher, drawn to helping children from difficult circumstances reach their potential. All three children carried forward the values their parents had instilled. That family is chosen as much as born. That success is meaningless without purpose. And that the greatest gift you can give someone is the chance to build a better life. Marcus and Rebecca's marriage grew stronger with each passing year, built on the solid foundation of friendship and respect that had brought them together. They faced the normal challenges of any couple raising children and running a business, but they approached each obstacle as partners, drawing on the strength they discovered during their most difficult times. Their love story became the stuff of local legend, proof that sometimes the best endings come from the most unlikely beginnings. When Rebecca looked back on that day when Marcus first stopped his truck and offered to help, she marveled at how a single act of kindness had transformed not just her own life, but the lives of everyone around them. The ripple effects of his decision to care about a struggling stranger had created opportunities and happiness for dozens of people, from the employees who found meaningful work on their farm to the customers who enjoyed the fruits of their labor. The story of the pregnant woman who was plowing fields alone until a rich cowboy made them, his family, became more than just a tale of rescue and romance. It became a testament to the power of human connection, the importance of community support, and the miraculous things that can happen when people choose to see potential rather than problems. Rebecca had learned that fairy tales don't require magic, just the courage to accept help when it's offered, and the wisdom to recognize love in all its forms.